What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So Dana White said recently in the press conference for UFC 289 that Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev is not a done deal. It's actually far from a done deal, and he believes Kamaru Usman is actually having second thoughts about that fight. Dana also said that he has no interest in doing a catchweight for Khamzat, and that he furthered it by saying he has a plan for Khamzat Chimaev that he's not ready to announce yet, but it will be announced soon. Now, that's all fine and good, and I'm excited to hear what news comes out as far as Khamzat's concerned. But the reality is September will be a year since he's fought. And the Khamzat Chimaev experience was something that was so exciting because he was fighting literally every weekend and taking on people in all weight classes. And now it's going to be almost a year in between times that we see him in the Octagon. And when you look at the landscape of 185 and the landscape of 170, there really aren't a whole lot of names that are available for him to fight in the fall. So one, what do you make of Dana's announcement? And two, what do you think Khamzat will do, and what would you like to see him do?
Well, I'd love to see him fight more frequently, but I understand how the UFC needs to be a bit careful with how they're going to, arrange his next few fights, because he's proven to us in just a few fights in the UFC that he belongs in title fights. He has the skill level of the champions that are currently sitting on top of the UFC's divisions. And I think that while he is a big guy for 170, he can make 170 as long as you give him enough time. And I think he can actually compete really well with the top of 170. But I don't know if they're going to give him a 170 fight for this fight in Abu Dhabi. And then I start looking at the rosters, because what we want as fight fans is we want a little bit of clarity, but we also like to do a little investigating and hunting ourselves. And when we heard that it was likely Kamaru Usman that he was going to fight next, we were like, okay, that's cool. We can go to bed.
Makes sense,
yeah. We can go to bed at night knowing that he's going to fight a former champion, which of course, if you beat Kamaru Usman, you're going to get a title shot, because Kamaru's been the champion for so long. Of course, he's not right now, but he's been so dominant and he's such a high-level guy that a win over him guarantees you a title shot, essentially.
100%.
But Khamzat Chimaev is now, I guess, saying that maybe that isn't what's going to happen, and you're starting to hear the rumor that that fight is not going to happen, and maybe it'll happen later down the road, but that's not what they're working on right now. And so you have to start wondering what the UFC is going to do. And in my opinion, the UFC looks at Chimaev as somebody who can truly be one of the next champs and somebody who can be a dominant champion, potentially in two divisions simultaneously. I think he has the skills to win at 170, and I think he has the skills to defend his belt and then move up to 185 and look pretty good there as well. But I don't know if the UFC wants to hold off on giving him his 185 title before they give him the 170, simply for the optics of going for that champ status. And I know this is not like a blanket statement and you don't have to do it this one way, but I feel like most people look at the divisions in MMA as the higher up you go in weight, the more difficult they get, because technically that is true.
Right.
So you don't want to see somebody who's the champion of 185 go down in weight to 170 to beat the champion there, because it's kind of like, well, we assumed he would be better than him because he's bigger than him.
Right.
And so for me, I think maybe the UFC is, being very patient and strategic with Khamzat's career, because I think they want him to get that belt at 170 and then go for champ status at 185, which seems like a better trajectory for the champ status.
Yeah, and we've only seen the champ attempt the other way one time, and that was the TJ Dillashaw attempt going down to try to beat Henry Cejudo, and that was a failed attempt in more ways than one.
Right.
And so it was kind of not a great experiment, and every other attempt has been somebody going up to contend for their belt. Mm-hmm. So I think that getting the belt at 170 and then contending at 185 is the better route than the inverse of that. So it still brings me to the question, though, of who is he going to fight? Because it seems like Colby is going to take on Leon. That seems like the next title fight at 170. And it seems like Duplessis is going to fight Robert Whittaker. And then the winner of that will likely fight Israel Adesanya, or do they just throw Khamzat in there with Israel Adesanya? And I know there's a card coming up in Australia that they'll probably want Adesanya to headline, so I doubt they'll bring Izzy to Abu Dhabi if there's a card just a couple months later that's happening in Australia and he just defended his belt and got his belt back. So I don't know that they're going to necessarily throw him right in there with Izzy. Paulo Costa's now booked. This weekend we have Marvin Vettori and Jared Cannonier. Maybe Bilal Muhammad. He just won a fight. He's somebody who I could see Khamzat in there with. I don't think they want to do the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight with Khamzat just yet, seeing as they're both undefeated and they're both kind of similar in a lot of ways as far as their fighting style and their backgrounds and things like that. So I don't think that they're going to put those two in there to fight at this point in time. I think they'd rather see a belt on the line before that fight materializes. So the Kamaru Usman fight made a lot of sense to me. I was like, okay, I don't care if it's a 170. I don't care if it's 185. I don't care if it's at a catch weight. Kamaru Usman's a guy with, if you beat him, you do get that title shot, as you said. So I think that would have been a great fight. If Kamaru's having second thoughts, then I guess we're going to have to go in a different direction. But I'm hoping that before September, which will mark 1 year of absence in the cage for Khamzat, that this is all resolved and we don't see him go a full 12 months without fighting, because I think that would really, unless they're going to just thrust him right into a title shot. And there's going to be some people unhappy about that, but you know what? Sometimes the UFC has their next big star that they want to try to make, and they're going to throw him right in there with Izzy and see what happens. And I could see the UFC doing that. They have done stuff like that before, but I want to see him fight before September at the very least.
Yeah, and Izzy just got done fighting somebody who was fast-tracked to the title. And I don't really look at Khamzat's career as a fast-track. I just look at him as taking quality, matches and really showing us,
dominating.
Yeah, the skills that he's got to dominate everybody. And it's almost like, how what they said about Francis Ngannou a few years back, like, no matter how long we need to wait for him to fight again, he's not fighting anybody else unless it's for a title, because it's legitimately too dangerous for anybody else to be in there with him. You got to be that good. And I think that if you had Khamzat like just hanging outside of the top 15, it would be like, he's just out there destroying people and it's not even competitive. And so he did need to get fast tracked to the top. And then I think when you get to the top, there's a lot of politicking and a lot of, business plans and ideas for everybody who's in the top three, who knows those number one contender spots and those title challenges are very difficult to come by. And if a champion does really well in a fight but doesn't get his hand raised, he might get an immediate rematch. So you can really shuffle yourself into the top three, and then without any wrongdoing on your own, get shuffled back out with other people's performances. So I think they have to be pretty particular with how they orchestrate Khamzat's next few moves. But I do think that because of his skills and because of his size, he is capable of being a number one contender in two divisions, which really does open some doors for him. And I think that Bilal Muhammad's probably one of the front runners that might get that fight. Off merit alone, he does deserve a number one contenders match. And I could see them throwing Khamzat in there with him, because if Bilal stubs his toe against Khamzat, he's going to have to climb back up again. But like you said with Shavkat, they're not going to want to take two monsters on the rise and throw them in there with each other, because one of them's going to have to stub their toe. And if that happens, now you've got one of your undefeated guys that's no longer undefeated. Now his crazy finish streak is off, or anything like that. Much better for that fight to take place when there's a belt on the line, and a belt is inevitable for both of those guys at some point in their careers. I happen to think Khamzat will get there first, and I happen to think that he'll go to the 170 belt very first before he makes his move up to 185.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to be Bilal. As weird as that sounds, I would have not said a month ago that I think Khamzat's next fight is going to be against Bilal Muhammad. But unless I'm missing something here, there's just nobody that's not paired up at 70 or 85, unless you're talking champions and you're going to pull Colby out of the fight with Leon and put Khamzat in there, or you're going to just thrust him right in there with Izzy, which, I'm going to say it's going to be Bilal. Yeah. I think, as weird as that sounds, that could be Khamzat Chimaev's next fight, and I hope they make it soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I don't think 185 has any names that we're leaving out. We don't really know. Everybody's got a dance partner. And then when you look at 170, pretty much everybody's got a dance partner. And there's not many names ahead of Khamzat at 170 right now. So it's either Khamzat versus Bilal, it's Khamzat for the belt, or it's Khamzat maybe replacing somebody. But either way, we need to get Khamzat in the Octagon as soon as possible. And I think that card in Abu Dhabi is the perfect opportunity.
Absolutely.